Double boom weekends, you lose a coach, but you might get a big staffer that might improve UCLA's recruiting under Chip Kelly. All that and more on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thank you for making the show your first listen, first view each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, review. Thanks for your support. If you're an everydayer, you would listen to a lot of UCLA content. Hey, basketball, men's and women's, football, everything in between, all sorts of action going on right now in Westwood. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Where we get started in this jam-packed episode of Locked On UCLA, starting first with UCLA football. We'll get to the reaction and discussions of what happened in Tucson and the domination. Wasn't domination, but a big-time victory for the UCLA women in Boulder, all that and more. We're starting with football because as the weekend drew to a close, lots of action was happening, right? Sunday, double boom. Ken Niumatalolo is now the San Jose State coach. But where I'm going to start is a hiring, maybe an under-the-radar hiring. I know it was reported by 24/7 Sports. It's Matt Zenitz who talked about, hey, this is a guy that UCLA just is reportedly about to hire as a new key recruiting personnel, maybe a director of player personnel. He's someone that's going to be a player in recruiting and help Chip Kelly, who might be flirting potentially with NFL offensive coordinating positions. I'm not entirely sure of the validity or how truthful that'll actually come if it comes to fruition. But for now, UCLA is looking at Darren Usher, if I'm saying his name correctly. He's someone who was in Boise State, part of big-time recruiting classes for the Broncos when they had year after year the top recruiting class in their conference. Worked at Auburn, worked at Oregon in the most recent season, now transitioning to UCLA. And where does Chip Kelly struggle with the most? Recruiting. Can this help high school recruiting? Well, this is someone who's helped facilitate that in Darren Usher coming through reportedly to UCLA to get a new director of operations in the recruiting side types of things for UCLA. This is where UCLA maybe makes an under-the-radar hire to help change the culture in the recruiting cycle, right? He was in previous high-ranking personnel and recruiting roles, Auburn, Boise State, and it was a general manager role where he was the director of player personnel at Boise State, where 5 of the top classes recently from Boise State from 17 to 21, he was a part of. If there's a way to try and change the game, change the narrative for Chip Kelly, it's going after the younger, youthful guys who have been there in the SEC, went to Oregon, was at Boise State, knows how to get the talent and bring it in, and that could be an under-the-radar move that can pay off and pay dividends for UCLA down the line. What's going to be tough, though, is while Chip Kelly made probably a pretty smart hiring with getting Darren Usher, UCLA's new quote-unquote general manager with the report from the 24/7 Sports, Matt Zenitz, it's the news that the coaching staff got taken into again. The 5th coaching hire Chip Kelly is going to have to make by seeing Ken Niumatalolo, who pretty much came to UCLA, one, to take a break being the director of leadership from a coaching perspective. Maybe it was going to take a leap into the tight ends coaching position for UCLA. And then all of a sudden was like, hey, after this year off, learning under Chip Kelly, learning a newer options, moving away from the triple option and from the Navy ties, he's going to be the Spartans head coach. So somehow in one full circle of life, Nick Saban's retirement leads to UCLA losing its tight ends coach. Isn't that funny? Isn't that kind of funny? Yeah, that's a long circle, but you go with Saban retires. You've got DeBoer to Washington. From Washington to Alabama, you've got Jed Fish. From Arizona to Washington, you've got Brett Bannon. You've got San Jose State coach going to Arizona. And then after it's all said and done, you've got UCLA's new tight ends coach, the head coach, at San Jose State, and I hope he does a fantastic job. But it is a blow in terms of the leadership in the locker room. Not that it's going to make an overall cultural downswing, but just think about the guys UCLA has in that locker room, former Bruins. You bring in the Navy head coach. You don't really defy what he says, right? Someone who is the winningest all-time coach in that program and has a lot of ties across the country, recruiting and developing players in a different type of way compared to the rest of college football. That's still going to be a hit to your locker room. But UCLA, you win some, you lose some. You bring in somebody who can be a big-time recruiter, hopefully, in Darren Usher, and then you lose Niumatalolo going to be the San Jose State head coach. Congrats to him. I wish the best. That is a bit of a blow to UCLA's room. Not that's going to hurt anything to the tight ends. And while I have seen what the rumors on social media float out, hey, go get this guy. Go get that. We'll see with the tight ends coach, right? You already had 2 tight ends coaches get hired at separate places to be head coaches. Ferris is over at Austin Peay. Let's go P. And then you've got San Jose State hiring another UCLA tight ends coach. Maybe you want to be a head coach. You should be the tight ends coach at UCLA. I'm just saying. All that to say, staff changes for good, for worse, and maybe the most important weekend in what was the double boom weekend from Ethan Young, the tweets. We've only seen one of the commitments come out public so far at this recording of this podcast. UCLA is addressing a significant need. I've talked about optimistic looks at the 2024 season recently. In the last week, I went over why UCLA's offense is going to have a bounce back year in 2024. They've got a lot of pieces coming back, and why there's optimism for the defensive side of things, even with the new defensive coordinator and losing some players, there's still reason for optimism in a different sense defensively based on what they might face down the line in Big Ten country and in the non-conference schedule for 2024. What UCLA needed, though, to have the offense click on all cylinders is depth in bolstering their offensive line. If they can protect Garbers or whoever's going to play quarterback, at this point, I see it's Garbers. I don't see where else it could go. Then you will have an offense that will look and seem much better than what was close to being a top 30 offense, but in reality couldn't blow out anybody, couldn't go put up. And that was in total offense, right? Total offensive numbers. They got the yards. They could run the ball, but not on 4th and short. When they needed to protect against the blitz, when they needed to protect against some pressure, Garbers needed some help because he got blown up sometimes in the backfield when dropping back to pass, or even Dante Moore, or even Colin Schlee, who needs some time to move around in the pocket to even evade and go run for 10, 15 yards a pop like he would. To go get another former Notre Dame player, right? UCLA goes and gets Michael Carmody. I believe I'm saying that right. We'll test it later. He goes from Notre Dame, another former Notre Dame player. UCLA is getting someone who was more of a regular player in 21, a starter then, 1 game in 22, not any action in 23, has 2 years of eligibility left in Carmody, who committed to UCLA. Another commit, he told 24/7 Sports, but all right, coming to UCLA. This is someone who's going to play offensive tackle, and where he's 6'6", close to 300 pounds. That's a big body UCLA needs on their offensive line. What does the Big Ten pride themselves on? Defense, defense, defense. Physical in the trenches. That's what the Bruins had to fortify, improve upon, get depth for going forward, just to make this offense a good Chip Kelly offense, that if the NFL rumors are true about him looking for an offensive coordinating position, you got to have an offensive line for Chip Kelly, any team, to play any sense of offensive ball, unless you've got the best quarterback in the universe who can evade pressure and drop dimes down the field. The Bruins do not have world beaters everywhere at this moment. They've got very good, talented guys who, if they play their roles, they will score points in 24. So all that to say, the recruiting's possibly going to get a big edge. The offensive room slightly took a mini hit with Niumatalolo leaving in terms of leadership and development, but they are fortifying the offensive line and bringing somebody in. That, I believe, is the first offensive lineman they got in the portal this year after a lot in previous years, after a lot in a year previous. So we'll see how this plays out, and if the next recruit comes public in the coming days for UCLA to see what they're getting. Maybe it's more offensive linemen. Maybe it's filling up the secondary, which is a key hole, and we'll talk about that in later Locked On UCLA episodes. Next, though, we're jumping ship to UCLA men's basketball. Crushing defeat in Tucson, encouraging signs. And is this where they're making a turn, or is this just a what could have been? Next on Locked On UCLA. All right, the NFL regular season all wrapped up and done. Playoff season is here, but you want to go to FanDuel right now to join America's #1 sports book. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you want to place some money on UCLA, minus 17.5, plus 17.5 at Arizona, hey, you would have gotten some play, because I thought that UCLA game against Arizona was going to be closer, and it was, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the app is super easy to use because there's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. The new Explore tab. Explore your world with FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Cruising on into the second segment for Locked On UCLA. Zach here. And all right. So what very well could have been the greatest single-week turnaround in college basketball history that doesn't involve the month of March with UCLA. Okay, that's a bit dramatic. That is a bit dramatic. Still, UCLA found themselves with getting beat down by 50 basically at Utah. They respond a few days later with a home victory against Washington, a come-from-behind win after watching Arizona State meltdown. And then you see UCLA go up 19 against Arizona in the first half, hitting every three in sight. And then they're up 15 in the second half, and everything just slowly watered away. And despite what the numbers show you, it seemed like Arizona hit every shot imaginable, and they eventually win 77-71. Encouraging signs that the Bruins are able to compete in a raucous environment in the McHale Center, where the Bruins just got hammered by the fans. They got hammered by a huge second-half run by the Cats, who scored nearly 50 second-half points. And yet it was encouraging for a UCLA team that did fall to 8-11, 3-5 in Pac-12 play, at Arizona, where nobody has been close to beating the Cats this year. And yet there's reasons to build upon going forward. Let's take a look at some keys to beating Arizona. These are going to be very frustrating when I tell you the keys to victory for UCLA, but they competed. 1, defend the three. What did Arizona do this game? If you're looking on YouTube, you see all three keys, but we'll get to one. First, the Bruins defended the three. They only shot, Arizona did, 23% from downtown. Yes, it felt like Love hit a clutch three. It felt like Boswell hit a clutch three. It felt like Larson was hitting threes all the time. That wasn't the case. They just hit threes in a big run, and they only went and shot 23%, which I did think this UCLA team could have been capable of defending them like Washington State did, where Arizona could have gotten a bit cold from three. The Bruins defense is there. It's not the most spectacular defense Cronin has ever had in his coaching career, but these are kids are coached up, athletic enough to play defense. Adembona, when he's on the court, makes up for any defensive mistake, basically, when he's not in foul trouble. And most importantly, Arizona was not hitting their threes. Defending the three, the Bruins did. Okay, number two, what do the Bruins normally do? These guys this year, this youthful team tends to cough up the basketball. And while we did Sebastian Mack, the freshman, had 4 turnovers, and then he had Andrews with 3, large in part, they played a lot of minutes and played clean basketball. Maybe in the moment of truth, they turned it over, had a little bit of anxiety with the basketball. Yet, they had 13 turnovers, not a terrible number. And Arizona only scored 12 points off turnovers. Now, if the Bruins turned over one time less, it could be a different game. No. The Bruins did not turn it over at a ridiculous, atrocious clip. They did that. They took care of the basketball. It was looking like beautiful UCLA hooping for most of that game. It was free-flowing basketball. Maybe you're going to read all these different, it was just beautiful to watch. You're like, they're hitting buckets. They were down 3-0. You're like, oh, here comes the onslaught the first 5 minutes. No, UCLA responds with the 3. Another 3. Matt, everybody was hitting shots left and right. They were doing things, which leads me to our third and final point. Score points, please. Score points, please. They went on the road. Of course, Arizona's not the most crazy defensive lineup in the world. They'll just outscore you, play enough defense, and dominate because they're good enough, they're big enough, they're strong enough to do all those things to just beat you. And yet UCLA went into their house, put up solid offensive numbers where the team, UCLA, was able to shoot decently, right? 44% on the road, 60% nearly in the first half, 67% from three. They hit 9 threes, 35% basically. For a team whose average is under 30%, they look like a team shooting with confidence for large portions of this game until the end, where they missed 4 threes in a row, a key costly missed dunk. And then all of a sudden, the Bruins still got to the free throw line 14 times. They converted. What went wrong? They just went cold. It was physical. The Bruins couldn't get the job done offensively. In larger part, so much foul trouble plagued the Bruins that after UCLA shot close to 20 free throws in the second half against Arizona State, and I knew, which was a mini fourth key that I didn't technically put on the graphic or tell you guys, or make really public, but they needed to get to the free throw line. UCLA needed to get to 20 free throws. They got a lot less than Arizona's close to 30 free throws. The Wildcats converted. It seemed like every bucket was an and one late, a big free throw, and of course they made some free throws to ice the game away. And still UCLA had it down to the final possession or two, where it was a missed three this time and a layup that put Arizona up by 4. And then all of a sudden the Bruins missed like 33s in a row in the final 20 seconds when they could have made it a 1-point game. They kept clanking it. That's what's frustrating. They hit every key, played as nearly perfect as a game as they could, and that sometimes you can still fall a little bit short. That is maybe what's important, right? They played to make that game competitive, where they were plus 17.5 in this game. If you look at the numbers, FanDuel and everything in between, they weren't expected to compete, let alone go up 19. Who could have imagined they were going to go up 19 in a game like that? No one. I was like, whoa, it's one thing to compete, but they were flat out balling. This team was playing well. Mac went there and was hitting some deep shots, passing the ball around, making some plays. Stefanovic, he's got that shooting slump knocked away. Pat Adembona, efficient when he's on the floor, but again, when he's fouling out playing 24, 25 minutes, UCLA suffers offensively, defensively, physically, emotionally, so much when Bona's off the floor. Dylan Andrews played 36 minutes, wasn't his best shooting game, has to takes on a huge role. It still got a few points out of it. Better K, limited role because he fouled out in 18 minutes. You saw a lot from Will McClendon. Limited time from an apparently ill Brandon Williams, according to Coach Cronin in the postgame. UCLA is playing closer to the game plan now. Closer, a bit better, guarding the three. Because other teams had lit them up from three or been clutch late in games. This kind of reminds me of the Marquette game, right? Where UCLA was up big in the second half, and all of a sudden a big Marquette run, and the Bruins folded, went back and forth, had a shot at the buzzer or two to tie and win that game against Marquette in Honolulu. This game played somewhat similar to that, bigger margin, more emotion, conference rivals. It's Arizona. Last time you go to the McHale Center's conference rivals, so there's growth. This team is clearly not the same from a week and a half ago, when they got blitzed by the Utah Utes, when they just got blitzed by Utah. And now you've got a team that was competing against what should be a 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. At one point was a top 4 team in the country. It could still, with all the parity in the country, still be like that with Arizona. The Bruins are right there on the road in Tucson. And while there's probably nothing UCLA can do to get back in the at-large conversation right now, they could be super, super annoying to play in Las Vegas and make us emotionally entertained when it comes to the Pac-12 tournament. The way they're growing and showing effort and competing on the road. The heartbreak is you win some of these close games, they'd be in the tournament conversation. That's the frustration with this team. But that's also right when you deal with the youth, the young guys. Even if it's a young adult, a kid, right? You're coaching anything. It's just a frustration. You see the potential, but the results haven't come yet. They're getting there. It's close. It'll be a matter of time. Unfortunately, will they be realized this year by winning a week-long stretch of games to get in the NCAA tournament? Is it going to be realized with the big reeling off of wins in the second half of Pac-12 play? Or is it going to be one of those years where, oh, that was horrible, but when you look back at the numbers, how many close games did they play? They're that close. They're that close to breaking through and making leaps and bounds as opposed to incremental growth. That would have been a leaps and bounds performance if you got away with a win. The morale probably a bit down, but still, so close. Frustrating. Super frustrating. You know who's not frustrating? You know who's dominant? And now the number 2 team in the country again, because they still should have never lost being the number 2 team in the country, the UCLA women, right? Let's talk about them in their record-setting performance with another sellout in Boulder. Lauren Betts going home and helping the Bruins propel them to a come-from-behind big dub against the Colorado Buffaloes as they try to sweep an equally tough road trip by finishing off in Salt Lake City against the Utah Utes next on Locked On UCLA. All right. Final segment of the pod today. We're talking UCLA women's hoops. The Bruins, 76-68 victory over Colorado, the number 3 team in the country. The Bruins gave Colorado their first conference loss. Saw every team literally in front of them lose, from Caitlin Clark getting smacked on a court-rushing fiasco. And hey, what's more important than, well, there's nothing more important than player safety. But you know what's important about that loss from Iowa? Not only did UCLA get to jump ahead of Colorado, Iowa, and NC State, all teams who lost, think about that Ohio State win the Bruins got. The Bruins went to Ohio State and won and were dominant despite that game being closer than it looked at the end. And Iowa couldn't even go in there and win. Now, conference rivalries, yes, and everybody's going to go a little crazier when Caitlin Clark's involved. Still, think about that win the Bruins got in Ohio State on the road. Beat them. That's a huge dub. That looks really good on the resume, and I still want to put up the merits that they're the top team in the country. It's just South Carolina's playing and beating up on some scrubs. Whatever. All right, here we go. UCLA, Colorado. The Bruins lately have been struggling to come out dominant in first quarter. Now, it's different when you're playing multiple top 10 teams in the country on the road, some of them for the second time, like USC, who fell down a couple of ranks after losing twice in the Mountain Schools. The Bruins are showcasing their veteran presence, the growth from year to year. And most importantly, I think it's Charisma Osborne is getting that opportunity, not only the opportunity, she always has the opportunity. She is showing up when she is needed to. Lauren Betts has been a steady presence, whether other than one game or two, she's been a steady super transfer. The sophomores have been good. It's all important. Osborne showing up in the time of need, not needing to put up 35, but 22 and leading the team in scoring in a come-from-behind charge, getting to the free throw line when the Bruins were trailing after the first quarter, trailing after the half, in a close game heading to the fourth. Back and forth they went until the Bruins slowly pulled away late. Osborne, 4 steals, a block, 22 points, gets to the free throw line, 50% shooting, 0 turnovers in 37 minutes. And I know we all saw the video and footage of Corey Close in the locker room wearing the football jersey, the Anthony Adkins jersey, coming in like, let's go, let's get tough, show the toughness. You're going to be in front of a sellout crowd with some big names in the crowd, and they showed up and they showed out. It's great to see that despite poor three-point shooting on the road, this wasn't even close to their best shooting, but the Bruins got to the line 30 times in the final 3 quarters. 30 times in the final 3 quarters. And you know what also helps? When you shoot 8 for 10 in the fourth quarter. When you don't basically miss a shot in the fourth quarter, the Bruins put up nearly 30 in the final frame. And Colorado, despite putting up some decent numbers, could not get the job done. Jalen Sherrod, who is a key cog for everything Colorado does. Only 2 assists and 4 turnovers. That number is usually not that backwards. The Bruins saw Sherrod struggle to shoot the ball in a big game. You had Von Lay, who couple assists but 3 turnovers. You get the point. Colorado had 16 turnovers. The Bruins won their turnover battle, scored points in the paint. And while they largely struggled from three to the Bruins, Colorado didn't go to the line as much, hit as many threes. And UCLA just did everything a little bit better when it came down to the moment of truth. Even Quan Miller, who normally was working on her fourth straight double-double if she had gotten one, 10.6 rebounds, and fouled out only after 32 minutes of play. Maddie Nolan, who has been a key cog shooting the three-point ball for them, 19 minutes, didn't hit a three, right? She was a big goose egg for the Buffaloes in that game. UCLA was able to make big plays, keep the Stars from Colorado down, and this will be a fun rematch late in February when Pauley Pavilion can hopefully be packed, and UCLA still got another tough game. That was only one half. That was just half of it. That is how much of a gauntlet the conference is this year in women's basketball. Okay, you got a big win. You're number 2 team in the country. They could easily fall against Utah after this podcast is dropped, and all of a sudden there's doubts. But there shouldn't be doubts because Utah's a very good team, despite having 5 losses already. They've lost to very good opponents, generally away from home. And UCLA has got the job done, but they're easily on upset alert against the preseason Pac-12 favorite and the preseason Pac-12 player of the year, basically, right, in Peely, who has been dominant and was dominant against SC with her nearly 40-point performance against Juju Watkins on the other side. So this team will be battle-tested, right? I'd love for them to go win the rest of their games. I didn't think this team was going undefeated because the schedule is way too tough. It's better to take that loss early, and it makes sense. In a sellout crowd, you take your loss on the road against your bitter rival who you already beat 2 weeks later. That was already a recipe for disaster. But if they go 2-1 on this road trip, if they go 2-1 between at SC sellout, at Colorado sellout, I'm not sure what the crowd at Utah is going to be like. You do all those things together. Who's got a tougher 3-game stretch in the country? And then you still mix in every practical team who is a tournament contender, basically. And up and down the conference, you can find just about every team who is a tournament contender or close to it. And even last year, Washington State went on a Cinderella run through the Pac-12 tournament. Beat UCLA, made it to the NCAA tournament. So even then, a 10th place team could do something ridiculous in this conference. Unlikely, but still on a night-in, night-out basis, the given cliche, oh, you've got to come bring your best. You have to bring your best. And this team consistently does in different ways. And their best is named Charisma Osborne, who came back just for this very moment to lead this program to new heights in the NCAA era of women's basketball, where the Bruins have not made a Final Four or won a championship. And with the leadership of Corey Close, you mixed in a super class, some savvy veterans, and then a big-time transfer getting Lauren Betts. This team is destined for special. Betts, who had a poor shooting performance, which was still 50% in her mind, 20-13 in front of lots of friends and family, got the job done. After being a little ill, not starting against USC, that probably had to be eating at her a full week off, playing in front of a hometown. I can imagine the nerves and everything played out in front of her right there. UCLA, man, there they go. And they didn't even shoot well in this game, and they still nearly put up 80. It's not often you're going to go get 30 free throws away from home. I'm not sure that always is the case in a sellout environment, but the Bruins play physical. They're tough. And when you've got that respect, like I think UCLA now has this year, they didn't have it last year. It didn't seem like they had that same moxie and respect. They were good, but it didn't seem like anybody thought them as a threat. This year, this team is a threat. And at some point, I would love for them on their road to go get a chance against South Carolina and just smack them and beat them. That would be great. But for now, they got to go beat Utah. They got to go play the Mountain Schools again. They got to go play the Washington, all these Pac-12 schools one more time. And then the Pac-12 tournament where you might play a Stanford, a USC for the third time in Juju Watkins. Hopefully to get a 1 seed in the tournament, have an easier route, avoid a tough matchup early on, but they'll be battle-tested for this tournament. There is no doubt in my mind there'll be a team that is more tested and more ready for the moment than this UCLA team after what they're going to have to survive to get through this gauntlet of a conference schedule. After it was a very tough non-conference schedule, and they still survived that. They'll be tested. Now, as long as they get the job done in March, into April, hopefully we'll be talking about this team deep into April and having lots of good memories with it. They can make program history with this team. And it was great to see them do it consistently against raucous crowds. They're close. They're getting closer to breaking through. They're already the threat. Now they're just waiting for postseason time to come around to get the job done, win the Pac-12 regular season, hopefully the Pac-12 tournament, and add on something even greater by the time the beginning of April comes around in Cleveland. All right, let's get excited for them. I can't wait to talk the women after they play Utah on a nationally televised game earlier in the day. And then you got the men who they're always going to be drama this year with their youth up and down. I got to talk about them again. And then UCLA football, coaching changes. Is Chip Kelly actually going to the NFL? Is there really any validity to those statements? We'll talk about all those later in the next episode. Next episode's this week on Locked On UCLA. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer saying, get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.